really smooth like this. And you could take this and put it right down over a bunch of cattle, move it all around their heads, and the animals didn't react to it. It moved, it moved just about like this. It was such a smooth motion that the animals didn't view it as a threat. The thing that kind of amazes me is how well using animal behavior can really work. Another principle is don't be yelling and screaming at livestock. Animals know when people are yelling and screaming, it's being done at them. And that will make the heart rate go up more than just the sound of gates slamming. Because the cattle and the horse or the mule, whatever it is, the goat, the pig, whatever it is, it knows that yelling is directed at it. And there's a scientist named Paul Hemsworth from Australia. And Dr. Hemsworth's done a lot of work on the relationship between the stock person and the animals. And what he has found is animals that are afraid of people are less productive. They'll have less piglets, less weight gain. It's not good for animals to be afraid of the people that care for them. Dairy cows that get yelled and screamed at and have a big flight zone, they give less milk. Cortisol levels go up when people scream at animals. No, calm down. Never surprise an animal. Let it know that you're coming. Don't just walk up behind and surprise them. Another principle is don't pat animals like this. All animals, they interpret that as hitting. Stroke it. Stroke it. Make it feel like the mother's tongue. And don't do little tickle touches, because little tickle touches set off an alarming response. And stroke it where mama licks the baby. That's the parts they really like to have stroked. Now with cattle, this is the no-fly zone, like the no-fly zone over the White House. Don't touch this, because if you press on this, there's an instinct there for the goat or the ram or the cow to butt back. So just don't touch this. Horse you can rub here. That's where there's a species difference. But don't be rubbing the ram, and there's a reason why rams are called rams. And you don't want to get that behavior started. And as you know, cattle kick to the side. You better know that. Now, in looking at restraint, I don't care if you're working with a little animal, like a chick, or a cat, or a kitten, or something like that, or a big animal. There's an optimal pressure to hold it. The mistake that's made is squeezing it too hard. And that was mentioned this morning with a duckling. Of course, you're going to kill a duckling if you squeeze it too hard. There's an optimal pressure. You want it to feel held. And that's true for holding an animal with something like a hydraulic squeeze chute. Remember, make sure you don't trigger the fear of falling. And there's an optimal pressure. Not too tight, not too loose. Also, avoid sudden jerky motion. Sudden jerky motion scares. Both seeing it and feeling it. And then there's kind of a confidence. Let's say the mare's got the baby foal there. Now you stroke the mare, and you stroke the mare, and then you casually just reach over and stroke the baby. That's the way to get your hands on the baby. Don't be sneaking up on it. Tame animal, obviously you can lead it, and never ever wrap a lead rope around your hand. Unfortunately, in Colorado, I had a young boy die because he tied his steer's lead rope to himself. Never wrap it around you, ever, ever, ever. Now, people working with animals need to understand the flight zone. Now, of course, a completely tame animal doesn't have any flight zone. Now, here's some sheep. Got a fairly big flight zone. Now you spend time working and walking with your animals, you can reduce these flight zones down. Now on the other hand, you want animals to have manners. You don't want a horse that's going to be in your pockets, pushing over, nipping at you and things like that. And one of the ways to get that stopped is, if it pushes, it doesn't get the treat. If it wants its back scratched and it pushes, take your hand off. In other words, get it to stop doing that by instantly withdrawing the reward. Okay, let's say we're changing pastures. Well, if they're mobbing the gate, I'm not going to open the gate. Okay, you stop mobbing the gate, you stand back nicely just for a second, then open the gate. And you can train the animals not to mob the gate. I think it's really important to train animals to have manners. No, you cannot go in my pockets. No, you cannot rip open grain bags that are on the back of the four-wheeler. We just don't allow that. You're going to have to ask for the feed nicely, stand back a little bit, you put your ears up really nice, ask for it nice, then I'll give it to you. And that really does work. You don't have to be screaming and hitting. It's just got to learn that you don't feed it until it's polite. This diagram kind of represents the flight zone. Now you've got a blind spot right behind the rear. Now the big mistake that people make when they're right up close to an animal, when it's in a chute, is they'll stand in front of the head and poke the butt. You got to get behind the shoulder if you want it to go forward. It's just not going to work. Another principle is, to get an animal to move, is you penetrate the flight zone a little bit to make him move, and then you back up to get him to stop moving. You want to train that horse to lead, you pull a little bit on the lead rope. If he takes a step forward, let go. Principle is, when he does what you want him to do, you instantly give a relief. But you got to do it within 1 second or they won't make the connection. Now, some other basic principles. If you're up real close to the animal in a chute, that point of balance is going to be the shoulder. And you've got to be behind it to get your animal to go forward. But let's say you're a little further away from your sheep, and you just get past the eye, it will often go forward. The point of balance tends to move forward. But they're not going to go forward if you're in front of the point of balance. Now, I want to just get you thinking about that a whole lot more. If you have an animal rearing up in a chute, especially one that's got some flight zone, they're doing that because you're in their flight zone. They're trying to get away from you. And what you need to do in that situation is to back off. Don't try to push it down. Just back off. Now, one thing bad in this picture is that guy's carrying an electric prod in his hands. Now, what's my view on electric prods? It should never be a person's primary driving tool. Once in a while you get a very stubborn animal that won't move, but lots of times you can get a stubborn animal to move, and I want to emphasize I'm not into hard tail cranking. That's something you don't want to be doing. Sometimes if you just take the tail, you just a little bit like that. Then it even leans forward, you let go. In other words, you're not winding it up. Just a little bit. Another thing that can make an animal move forward sometimes is take your knuckles and just go down its back like this, from the head back towards the tail. Sort of like a chiropractor down its back. That will sometimes get them to go forward. Okay, we've got an animal turning back on you. The mistake this guy made was to just get up there on top of him. What you got to do is you got to back off. You got to back off before they start to turn back. And I absolutely hate dogs around the cattle working area. You've got them biting at cattle. It teaches cattle to kick. Then when they go on to the locker plant or they go on to somebody else, gets them, and then they get kicked in the head by them. Because when they're in the chute, they can't get away from the dog. Now, I've seen dogs used well out in the field, but in the chute, it's not a good thing. Now, here is the handy-dandy way to get an animal to move forward. And it seems really counterintuitive, but it works. Let's say you had cattle lined up in a chute right here. If I just step forward and quickly walk back past the balance point, they will go forward. And the principle is you walk inside the flight zone in the opposite direction of desired movement. Now, these diagrams that I'm showing you, they're all in my humane handling book that will be at the bookstore this afternoon. And you walk outside the flight zone going in the same direction. And you can use this movement pattern out on pastures to move animals too. The same principle will work out on pastures. Okay, these people are doing things right. They didn't jam the crowd pen that leads up to their single file absolutely, totally full of animals. Okay, here are some other movement principles. Use following behavior. All of these animals, sheep, cattle, goats, they all want to follow. And they also want to go back to where they come from. So if you lay out a facility so you come on around a half circle, then they're going back to where they come from. You want to use that tendency to go back to where they come from. Also, when herd animals get separated from the herd, a single animal, they often get really upset. And one of the animals that ends up putting a lot of people in the hospital is a lone animal going berserk because it's been separated from its herd mates. Might be a really good idea to take another friend along with it, so it won't get so upset. Sheep, you can handle in one big blob, a continuous flow. They're super followers. Cattle and goats you want to handle in small, separate bunches. Pigs, cattle, and goats, small, separate bunches. Then bring a buddy along. They're going to stay a lot calmer. And if any of you are working with bison, when the tail's up, that's a sign that he's starting to get really upset. Electric prod should never be a primary driving tool. Now, some people say we ought to just ban them. Well, I've seen too many tails cranked off where the tail has been broken, animals beaten up, sticks with nails in them, all kinds of bad things like that. And if you ever do have to use an electric prod, you use it once and then you put it away. You don't ever have it in your hand. In fact, the big packing plants now, like the ones they got in Colorado, they only have one battery-operated prod and it leans against the wall most of the time. Now, when we first got them changed to getting rid of all those electric prods, they didn't think it'd be possible to do that. But we had to do a lot of training. We also had to do a lot of work on getting rid of distractions that scare animals. I'd prefer to use a little flag, something like that. Now you'll notice in that handling facility there's some metal struts on the floor, on the ground there, and if that's making the animals balk, then cover them up with dirt. Watch your animal. They'll show you the things they don't like. Now the thing is, new things are both scary and attractive. New things are attractive if the animal can voluntarily approach something new. Like if you want to train your animal to tolerate being here at this carnival, or fair, whatever you want to call it. It's going just great, and you've got absolutely great weather here for this. Flags are a really common thing. Flags, bikes, and balloons. Well, a good way to train your animal to tolerate these things would be to decorate the pasture with flags and let the horses and cattle and the other animals come up to those things. Let them voluntarily investigate. Because if you shove those things in their face when they come into town, your animal that's got the really flighty genetics is your animal that's going to panic. So a basic principle is, new things are attractive if the animal can voluntarily approach. And new things are scary when you force it in their face. But there's also a genetic interaction. The animal that's got the flighty temperament gets more scared when you suddenly shove something in its face. And I've had someone say to me, well, I had some Solera cattle or had some Arab horses or whatever, and they were absolutely tame at home, and when they went to the fair, they went crazy. Well, they were tame at home because they were used to everything at home. It's actually good to get animals used to some variety. Different people, different vehicles. Now, I'm not recommending feed them always at the same time because you don't want to mess up the digestion. But it's okay. Four-wheelers are okay. Pickup trucks are okay. Cars are okay. Quite a lot of different things are okay. So then when they get brought to town, they don't completely freak out. Now, one of the things I want to talk today about animal welfare, we've talked about handling. It's a very, very big part of animal welfare. But one of my biggest concerns in the future on animal welfare is what I call biological system overload. We've got a modern dairy cow today. It's been pushed genetically to make more and more milk. And now she's very difficult to breed. We've got pigs that have been pushed to make more and more, pork, and then we start to have problems with disease. You see, things like productivity and disease resistance, there's sort of two opposing goals. Two other opposing goals are high productivity and meat quality. You take any animal and you want to just put out the most meat, okay, like quinine and cattle would be a good example, you tend to get a lot of tough meat. And then some people are using beta agonists, which are not hormones, or not antibiotics, to make animals heavier. Yeah, and you end up with a lot of tough muscle when you do that. And I've been following all the stuff going on with colony collapse disease. Like the big mystery with that, why were the bees having all this problems? Well, I just was reading Bee Magazine today and talking to some beekeepers, and I